Incredible, and I'm really honored to be here and share space with incredible leaders in their own right, and start a fascinating conversation that continues in the vein of, I think everything we've heard this morning and everything we continue to hear about the importance of the individual and the importance of our communities that raise us. And I think, should we just jump right in? Is that okay?
Let's just jump in.
Yeah.
Why not?
Well, what I loved is just the theme of this conference, talking about place, because I think for me, place is always really represented in interacting with your history and the legacy of where you are. One of the only tattoos on my body, this is a side note, but it will make sense in a second.
Mom's wondering where this is going right now.
We actually have tattoos in the same place. She knows exactly where this is going. But it's 1963, and it, for me, represents the work that was done that year, as well as the atrocities that occurred that year, from the bombing of the Birmingham Church and the assassination of Medgar Evers to the March on Washington, and more importantly, a larger idea of people continuing to work towards a future they weren't necessarily guaranteed but deemed essential. And I know that 63 is also a pivotal year for Chicago, as 200,000 students boycotted segregationist school policies. And so in talking about place, one of my first questions is just, how do we as a community continue in the legacy of the work that's presented to us?
Well, first of all, I am just thrilled with this representation of amazing young leaders that I've had the opportunity to get to know and to see and to learn from and be inspired by all around the world. And Yara, thank you for participating and helping to moderate this. The objective of the foundation is to create more and more platforms by which all of you can thrive and succeed. And one thing to remember about 1963 is that most of the leaders of the civil rights movement were your age. I mean, Dr. King, when he first started with the Montgomery bus boycott, was 25, 26. Think about that. John Lewis, who is one of the only remaining, in fact, I think is the only living person on the original program that I have framed. It was given to me as a gift from the March on Washington, was just barely 20, 21. And so one place to start when you think about where do we go next, how do we continue to bring about greater equality, greater justice, greater opportunity, is to remind yourselves that the same doubts, uncertainties, struggles, difficulties, challenges that sometimes may weigh you down, they were going through. The same divisions and arguments about how should we approach social change, who should be in charge, what are our best tactics. They were having those same discussions and arguments. And perhaps most importantly, I think it's really useful to remind ourselves that they were part of a continuum just as you are part of a continuum. So we were talking backstage about the notion of nonviolent resistance. Well, Dr. King and civil rights workers had learned the idea of nonviolent resistance by watching Gandhi in India and the movement to achieve independence from colonialism. And so they were part of that continuum. They were part of a continuum of Charles Hamilton Houston, one of the first African Americans to attend Harvard Law School, who helped to engineer the strategy with Thurgood Marshall that ultimately led to Brown versus Board of Education. That was another part of the river that they were merging with. Rosa Parks had learned to sit down, not just because her feet were tired, but because the Highlander School, which drew on some of the activist traditions dating back to the Great Depression and before, that was part of the stream. So you're part of that continuum. And the good news is that when you start feeling that you're a part of something larger, that you're taking a baton from somebody else and then you're running your stage of the race and then you're passing it on, A, you don't feel as alone. B, it also gives you a sense of perspective and some patience, because it is very rare where change happens overnight. And that's, now, when you're young, you're supposed to be impatient. If you're too patient and you're young, you may not get to where you want to go. But the danger of impatience is you can get discouraged if change doesn't happen right away. And I think that the most important thing for all of you is to remember that the work you're doing in this place at this moment is not going to be the beginning, and it's not the end. And as long as you are doing good work in that moment, at that time, and helping people concretely move the needle a little bit, push that boulder up the hill just a bit, then you can take satisfaction with that. And that's what builds over time. But, I don't know, does that make sense? Mimi, what do you think about the question? How do you think about being part of as a really young person, and you're trying to figure out in your specific community, when you're out there bringing about change, are you thinking about the struggles of people before you, or are you just thinking, man, this seems hard, and how do I get this done now, and what do you think?
Well, I'm not really focused on if it's hard for me, you know.
Tell us a little bit about what you're doing, just so that people know.
So I'm Mimi. I'm in the Hartford Community Leadership Corps. My project there, we are trying to create an organization called Wealthy Minds. So don't think wealthy like money, think wealthy like wellness. So Wealthy Minds. And basically what we want to do, so there's a lot of resources in Hartford, but a lot of people don't know where they are. Maybe they have an access issue, or they just don't know how to get to these resources. So my group and I, we want to create a platform and a space where we can connect these people in Hartford with the resources we already have. And while we do that, we also want to connect it back to the arts. Because whenever there's something going on in the community, you know, the way we express pain is through the arts. Like sometimes we want to listen to music, or we want to do spoken word, or we, you know, go to see a film, whatever it is. The arts provide an outlet for everybody, and that's what we want to do. So we had our first pop-up event actually two weeks ago, and it was amazing. We had about 50 people come out, and we partnered with the Jordan Porco Foundation, Hartford Psychological Services, and the Hartford Gay and Lesbian Health Collective, and they provided resources that we could give back to the people already in our community. And we had a drag performer perform, we had a spoken word singer, and it just felt like a space of healing towards something better.
Excellent. Yeah. Fantastic. Do you want to move on to another question? Because I've got questions for all these people.
Yeah, then
Because they're really much more interesting than me. Or at least you've heard from me more than you've heard from them.
Okay, well then, for the sake of hearing from somebody else, let's actually hear from DeAndre, who has a question about what catalyzes change.
Okay. So, good afternoon. I gotta be formal for the television, you know. But my question is, I know what passion and drive it takes to work hard and change something, and to do something that many other people can't do. as a black man, what made you believe that you can change an entire country or change things in an entire country in a place where I've especially been told that I can't do it? And when did that happen?
I was dropped on my head as a child. And so I didn't have any sense. Well, I think this actually connects with Yara's earlier question about